called Natalie. We were going to visit her family. And a journey that should take around 2.5 hours from Ramallah to Jenin took us 7.5 hours. Everywhere along the route, the Israelis had pulled boulders into the road, or had bulldozed the road altogether. We had to go up and down mountains, talk about off-roading, but off-roading in a 25-year-old Volvo is not funny. I actually threw up 3 times. We ended up getting out on a rocky hillside, and I watched with horror men, women and children preparing for their religious festival of joy, carrying bags and dragging suitcases down the hillside to try and find people to give them a lift on the other side. And when we got to Jenin, in the refugee camp, I went for a walk around on my own to see what it was like. And I remember a little boy there, terrible eye problem, all scabbed over, very difficult to look at, and the other one half closed with pus. The sort of treatments that are curable, that the Lady Fatima Trust puts money into. And his eyes were all gummed up, and he pointed a gun at me, a toy gun. And I was standing there going, come on, I'm a visitor, it's okay, it's okay. His eyes were kind of blank. There was trauma there. So I was standing there going, oh, we're playing a game. And suddenly the taxi driver who'd driven me there jumped in front of me and pulled the gun to the ground. It was a real gun. That's how unhappy, how terrorized the children of Jenin were at that point. Then I had the extreme pleasure of going to Gaza in 2008 with the Free Gaza movement. Spending time in the world's biggest concentration camp. I will call it a concentration camp. It's hard to describe it as a pleasure, but I promise you it is. I was there for a month in 2008. I remember visiting a lady's house. Well, really a cement room in a refugee camp. Everybody there greeted me. Assalamu alaikum. How are you? Assalamu alaikum. Cup of tea. People so smiling and so friendly that all of those headlines that called it Hamastan, the Islamic enclave, the terrorist republic of Palestine, they just dissolved. I'd gone into another world, a world where the children grabbed you by the hand and gave you smiles, where the women gave you the clothes off their backs, where they would feed you when they had no food. I realized I was falling in love with the Palestinian people. If any of you have read a very famous book called The Road to Mecca by Muhammad Asad, does anybody know that book? I recommend it. It's a wonderful, wonderful journey by a journalist 100 years ago who didn't know he was going to become a Muslim. But he was on a camel in the desert, and a companion said to him, so how did you come to find Islam? And his friend said he fell in love with the Arabs and then he found Islam. Well, having read that book, I realized that's what was happening to me. And I went to this lady's cement block living quarters in the Rafah refugee camp one night at Eid, during Eid. And she greeted me like this. Assalamu alaikum, fadal, fadal. And the smile on her face was so exquisite that I forgot that I was in this fallen down, terrible condition, cement block room with dirty mattresses lined up around the walls where people would sleep that night. I forgot that I was going into a place where the kitchen was not much bigger than this here, where she had 2 little cooking rings where she tried to cook for 9 people, if she had anything to cook. Because she greeted me as if it was the Taj Mahal, her home. And it made me want to smile. But it also made me angry, her smile. Because it was Ramadan. Yeah, it was Ramadan. And I said to her, I don't understand why your God makes you go hungry for a whole month. I just don't understand why, when it's already difficult for life in Gaza, why you should not drink water and why you should not eat during the day. What is your God trying to prove? And this lady in the Gaza refugee camp, she looked at me with a sweet smile on her face and she said, "Sister, we fast in Gaza to remember the poor." I've told that story an awful lot of times now. But it always does something to me inside. Because I felt like a key went into a lock. And a thought came into my head. If this is Islam, I'm in. Because what I saw at that moment was a purity that was love. Sheer love. Not politics, not sectarianism, not schisms, not drones, but sheer love. I didn't know that I was on the road to Mecca.